Hello, I'm the Jim Stanham. Yes, this is a video essay, and I hope you enjoy it. It's my first video essay, and it's probably a little sloppy, so please be gentle. Now, before we begin, this video is a response to Cold Take's video on sponsorships. I'm going to be showing basically the whole video here, but you should watch that video first, form your own opinion on it, and then watch this response. The link to that video will be in the description. Okay, on to the show. Dear Frost, I want to begin by saying that I love Cold Take. I loved it when it was on The Escapist, I loved it when it was on Second Wind, and I love it now as an independent production. There is no bad blood between us. I hope. I don't like it when people are mad at me. So, a few months ago, you released a video talking about content creators and their relationships with sponsors. And while I don't think you're wrong per se, I think your analysis is incomplete. I want to continue the conversation that you started, so I'm writing an open letter to talk about the content creator industry, to analyze the anatomy of YouTube ad revenue, and to answer the question, can a creator need a sponsor? Now, the only way I can answer that is to delve into your video and talk about it from my perspective. But before I can do that, I need to discuss context. To paraphrase one of the great philosophers of our time, we did not just fall out of a coconut tree, but rather we exist in the context of all in which we live and what came before us. We both have our contexts and perspectives formed from our background, and our worldviews are shaped by our experiences. Before I discuss your video and give my response, I want to provide my context and provide my perception of your context from the clues that you've given us in your body of work. And for those watching who don't care about context, I'll put a timestamp here to skip to the meat of the response. Thanks. So, you, Frost, are a content creator on YouTube and on Twitch, but you don't see this as your job, nor do you intend for it to be your job. You list on your LinkedIn that you are a do what I want specialist, a job title I'm unbelievably envious of, by the way. And from that, I gathered that your day job is a combination of various freelance jobs, such as writing, voice acting, and taking consultant roles for game developers, among other roles in the game industry. All that to say, Cold Take is your, I'm not sure what you'd call it, but I'll say side hustle. Let me know if you see it differently, though. I'll also note that Cold Take used to be tied to a larger organization, first being part of The Escapist and later Second Wind, before you went independent to do your own thing. To my knowledge, you run your entire channel by yourself, with no additional editors or writers or artists on your payroll. And also, I know that whether or not you've made it in YouTube is kind of a very nebulous thing, but from my perspective, it does seem like you made it as a content creator. You pull a respectable view count for each video you make, and you got a decent-sized audience for your work. You're not like Markiplier, but in my opinion, you do very well on this platform. I, on the other hand, am also a content creator, but I also don't feel like I've made it in the YouTube space yet. I do have an audience that, don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly grateful for, but I've also got a very small audience compared to other creators in the space, even among the niche of the main game that I play. Unlike your content, which is mostly video essays on the game and content creation industries, I am mostly a Let's Player, more focused on playing games than critically thinking about them. Though I do make scripted content with my Story of a Red World series, and I also do want to branch out into more varied content like video essays. Kinda like this. I also aspire to one day be a content creator full-time, and I would love to do Twitch streaming on top of making content for YouTube. For now, though, those plans for full-time content creation are held back by my real job. Now, I have a regular old day job as a software engineer, and I've never been employed within the game industry. And, I mean, I've dabbled in game development in my spare time, but I've never actually made a proper finished game. I definitely wouldn't call myself a game developer. But I have spent the majority of my free time over the past 26 years watching YouTube videos of all stripes, from Let's Plays to machinima to video essays. And I kind of feel that all of that has shaped how I approach the videos that I make, and it's inspired how I feel about the content creation industry as a whole. Now, I'm certainly no expert, but I feel that all those years of consuming content has taught me a little bit about what it's like to live the life of a full-time content creator, which is why I feel able to make this video in the first place. Okay, that was a lot of yapping about nothing. So without further ado, it's time to respond to your video. But first, this video is sponsored by... Nah, I'm just screwing with you. Roll the tape.
I'm a little tired of seeing content creators act like sponsors are necessary. Holding their own content hostage, providing a worse product, and treating it like it's the audience's problem. For context, a satirical article was posted about a YouTube series called Game Nights. The joke was that there were so many ads in this series that the ad blocker would just block the whole video. And there was a funny little zinger about YouTube cracking down on explicit content, so it's weird to see such a big channel jerking Wizards of the Coast off on camera. Someone tweeted that the article was based, and the host of the show, Jimmy Wong, responded, "Your choice, content with ads or no content at all. The ads are kind of how it gets paid for, you know? Satire is satire though, so no harm, no foul. So just skip through the parts you don't like with your mouse and keyboard." To elaborate, when Jimmy says ads, he's not talking about the ads that YouTube or whatever platform injects into videos. He's talking about sponsored ads that they personally accept and then plug into their own content.
Okay, to be honest, I'd never heard of these guys before I saw this video, but I skimmed a recent video of theirs and wow, that satire article really wasn't too far off the mark. In the description of that video that I skimmed, they listed no less than 6 sponsorships and an ad for their own short film. Yeah, I won't lie, after seeing that, hearing Mr. Wong say content with ads or no content at all, it does sound a little disingenuous.
No ads, no content though. Personally, I think this is backwards. It's not no ads, no content, it's no views, no ads, no revenue. And then you can choose whether you want to make content with or without money.
Okay, this is what spurred me to make this response, because I get what you're saying, and I so very badly want to agree with that. But on the other hand, I think I have 2 main issues with that statement. 1, we live in a world where you need money to survive, so if you were trying to do this full time, it's no money, no rent, no house, no content. And that brings me to point 2. People want to do this full time. I certainly do. You know, I currently make content for almost no money, and I also know that that wouldn't be anywhere near sustainable if I got laid off from my day job one day and tried to build a business playing video games for a living. And as such, I'm kind of forced to make content in whatever spare time I can scrounge up because my job, my family, my friends take up almost all the time that I have. And I worry that because of this, I'm not always able to make the best possible content for my audience because it can't be my main priority. I don't know how you straddle the line of work-life balance, but for me, it might as well not exist.
The only reason any of us can make money to begin with is because of our audience.
Okay, this I 100% agree with. None of us would have anything without our audience, and I know we both appreciate them all dearly. At the time of writing, I have about 1,400 subscribers, and I'm grateful for all of them. And I can only hope that as I continue my path as a content creator, that my audience will continue to grow alongside me. And certainly bad business decisions are not the fault of the audience. They are the fault of the creator. And I think every creator who wants to make this a full-time job should remember that.
And before we even get to talking about the problem with sponsors, let's not forget that YouTube and all these other platforms also let you make money by playing ads. There seems to be this idea that it's not much money, so I will tell you that my last video is almost 14 minutes long. And at over 50,000 views, it's netted me about $200.
Okay, folks, it's time for some math. Stay with me, I promise it won't be too bad. So, YouTube determines the payout to creators from ads with a value called cost per mille, mille meaning 1,000 views, or CPM for short. For example, my average CPM for my channel over the past 28 days as of writing has been a little over $4. So that means with the about 5,000 views I've received over the past 28 days, by the numbers I should have received about $20, right? Well, in my YouTube Studio app, it says I made about $10 because I lied. It's not based on views of the video, it's based on views of the ads of the video. So if a viewer is watching with ad block on or skips all the ads the second that they can, the creator doesn't get squat. The actual metric for determining the payout per view on the video is revenue per mille, or RPM. My most recent video at the time of writing received about 2,800 views, and according to my analytics, the CPM of that video was about $3.88. In that time, it made $4.11. The RPM of that video, according to my analytics, is $1.46. And all that said, I want to do the math on your video as well. 50,000 views for $200 means an RPM of $4. I guess your audience might be more ad block averse, or maybe your CPM's a lot higher than mine. Either way, good for you, genuinely.
Is that a lot of money? I grew up poor, rural, and working class, so in my opinion, $200 is a lot of money for some yapping.
Okay, it's time to do even more math. So, is $200 a lot of money? Don't get me wrong, it certainly could be depending on where and how you live, but as someone who grew up poor, suburban, and working class, and now lives urban and middle class, $200 would not be nearly enough for my expenses. To explain this, I want to give a little more context about my situation, so I'm going to do something a little stupid and tell you all how much I pay in rent for my one-bedroom apartment in the Denver metropolitan area. $1,789. Almost $1,800 for 1 month's rent. Now, to be fair, I live in a city experiencing a housing crisis, in a state experiencing a housing crisis, and I live alone. So I could reduce those costs by getting a roommate or moving somewhere cheaper or whatever, but this is my current reality. I just happen to be lucky enough to have a day job that lets me live here mostly stress-free. If I were making content at my ideal output of one video a week, I would need to be netting over 100,000 views per video at your RPM, or almost 300,000 with my current one, just to cover my rent, not taking into account any other expenses. My entire lifetime views haven't hit 200K yet, just to give further context to that number. To be absolutely fair, if I were doing this full time, I could dedicate way more time to making videos, and I might be able to release 2 or even 3 videos a week and get those view requirements lower. And also to be clear, these numbers are not impossible by any means. Even within the niche of the main game that I play, there are content creators who are able to reach those kinds of numbers and make a living off of this. Some of those content creators are even able to hire an editor to help with the creation process. But I'll also note that many of these creators also take sponsorships where they can get them. And if I was a full-time content creator, I would also be looking at sponsorship opportunities that come my way, kind of hoping to fill the gaps in case viewership dips, that kind of thing. We're all at the mercy of the almighty algorithm, that's for sure.
Especially if you consider that this isn't my job. It doesn't cost my audience a penny out of pocket and doesn't inflict them too much mental anguish. Let Google pay for it, that's my motto.
That's a pretty good motto, especially since you're not doing this full time. Without the stress of relying on YouTube for income, it's so easy to just let YouTube handle it and take your cut. Now, that's more or less my reasoning currently, but I also know that if I jumped into full-time content creation, this motto might just not cut it if it meant my grocery money was on the line.
Now, the first place people go wrong is they try to squeeze more money out of YouTube, and you can do that by making longer videos using buzzwords or evocative thumbnails, but I personally find that while that gives more money in the short term, it causes your audience to lose faith in the long term.
Yeah, I agree. Clickbaity titles and thumbnails just aren't healthy for the YouTube ecosystem or for the creator. Like, if you're just trying to get people excited about a video, be honest about it at least. I never want to mislead my audience into watching something they didn't want to see, and I think we as content creators should be more respectful of our audience's time.
What I find does better is I go for a higher ratio of engagement. Instead of making mountains out of molehills to fill an arbitrary schedule, I only show up when something excites me from the start. And a video is only ever as long as it needs to be. No padding, no filler. Sometimes I don't even put endings on these things. I am relatively long-winded for a schmedium form content guy, but I think that's just part of my charm.
And also, to be clear, this is possible even when people are doing this full time. You know, if you have a loyal fan base supporting you on, say, Patreon, you can have a lot more leeway to make things your way, as many video essayists like HBomberGuy or Folding Ideas do. They don't have to abuse underhanded tactics to get views on their videos. They can just make great videos because they have an audience that supports them through the process. And, well, because they make great videos. Sometimes the hard work really does pay off.
But there are 2 compromises I'm willing to make to YouTube for money, and the first one is copyright. You can upload a lot of copyrighted material, you just can't make money from it.
I actually suffer from this a lot with my Story of a Red World series. Just between you and me, I don't actually get permission from the owners of the stock footage I use. I just rip them off whatever site and I throw them in. And if I get dinged for copyright, I just kind of accept it because they're already niche videos for a smaller audience. And again, my grocery money isn't at stake.
And the other one is I keep it relatively family friendly. If you're too blatantly inappropriate or potty mouthed, your potential revenue does get hit pretty hard.
You know, I've actually heard YouTube's changing their policies a little bit to give you some more breathing room here, but I also try to keep my content as family friendly as Hearts of Iron 4, a game where you can play as the literal Nazis, can be. Although, I do find it funny that you say this in a video that has a swear in the title.
And while the gaming industry does leave a man wanting to drop a few F-bombs on live pre-recorded television, I would gladly choose to say frick before saying this video is brought to you by BetterHelp.
I am so glad you brought up BetterHelp, because I think another key area to the issue of sponsorships is that not all sponsors are created equal, but rather they exist on a spectrum. On the one end, you've got the sponsorships that are genuinely providing a product or a service, like Audible or Ground News or HelloFresh. And you know, they may or may not be slightly overpriced, but otherwise they are legitimate and real and provide a benefit to their customers. Then kind of somewhere in the middle, you have the sketchier sponsors that may provide only a nebulous service or misrepresent their value to a customer. Now, I would put most password managers here, as plenty of browsers like Chrome already do this for you for free, and also having a single point of failure for all of your passwords is a very bad thing. You know, they do what they say they do, but it's not actually as helpful as you might think. I'd also say that most VPN ads used to be, and I guess some still are, in this category. Tom Scott did a wonderful video on this a few years back, talking about the gross misrepresentations of facts that VPN advertisements were making, saying things like, anyone on a public Wi-Fi can steal your passwords, which just isn't true. However, since that video came out, most of those companies have changed for the better, more accurately representing their value to customers, especially highlighting that you can access your home region's content even when you're traveling abroad, which is totally reasonable, or that you can keep your ISP from seeing what domain names you're connecting to. Again, totally reasonable. Now, obviously, the biggest draw of VPNs, that you can use them to get away with illegally downloading pirated content, that's not mentioned still, but the reasons that they do give are legitimately useful for people. So I guess it's possible for sponsors to improve over time. And then on the far end of the spectrum, you have the evil sponsors that are either malicious in their services or just outright scams. Sponsors like Honey or Established Titles or, yes, BetterHelp. And of course, there's gambling sites like Stake, Please Gamble Responsibly, that can technically fall almost anywhere on the spectrum depending on how they're advertised, but they usually end up here. Now, you bring up a great point in your video on content creator gambling, that the content creators who are sponsored by gambling companies aren't actually gambling, because there's no risk to it. And I think that makes me and a lot of other people reflexively call them scams. And I think a large part of the reason sponsors became a controversy in the first place is because of these bad actors polluting the ecosystem and the content creators enabling it. We, as content creators, should stay vigilant around potential sponsors and never accept money from those who would try to fleece our audience. We owe it to our audience and to ourselves. But I also must stress, and I'm pretty sure you'd agree with me, not all sponsors are bad. I use HelloFresh to pull one example, and I'm happy with their service. And if they ever approached me and asked for a sponsorship deal, I would absolutely say yes. I think endorsing a company that you use and trust is perfectly acceptable behavior. And I think if we all held each other to that standard, YouTube would be a much better place.
No ads, no content. And someone's probably thinking to themselves, I can't run a business under these kinds of constraints. Well, that's your problem. Choosing YouTube as a business, that's your problem, not the audience's.
Again, totally 100% agree this is not the audience's problem. It's the creator's problem if they were to approach this as a business to run it profitably, but more importantly, ethically. Like, if I had the choice between continuing my course as a part-time creator with a small audience, or selling my soul to Stake Please Gamble Responsibly for the chance of doing this full-time, I think I'd rather stick with my day job. I just think this doesn't have to be all or nothing. We can vet our potential sponsors, find the ones we like, and advertise them ethically and by the books. I know there's a lot of content creators that don't follow that code, but I certainly don't want to sell out for the sake of chasing those honey-soaked dollars at the expense of my audience.
The way it used to be was making content had to be done on your own dime, on your own time, or you had to be successful enough to make it on YouTube ad revenue alone.
I think I'll defer to H-Bomber Guy on this one.
It's easy to get rose-tinted about the early days, the 240p wiki wild wild west before anyone had sponsorships or even qualified for ad revenue. There was no money in it, so people just made what they liked making. Things were better, more original then. This was never the case.
Sure, a few people back then were able to scrape by off YouTube's ad revenue policy, but back in 2007 or even in 2012, how many people were really able to make this a job, much less a business? Certainly not as many as today, where there are thousands of creators across all genres of content who are able to make a living off of this platform and platforms like it. Now, I do think we may be suffering from success in that regard. Like, maybe we do live in a bubble, and when it bursts, a lot of creators are going to have to be forced out of the business just because there's no money anymore. But for now, in this environment, we're able to watch content that could never have been made on a scale that never could have been made back in the days of, like, network television. We have creators for underrepresented genres like queer literature analysis who, while obviously some would still exist without the money, can make more content and be seen by a wider audience by being able to make a full-time career out of it. Now, I'm not trying to say that sponsors are like the great equalizer or something like that, but I do think giving niche content creators more sources of income can be good for the ecosystem, as long as those sponsors are properly vetted, of course.
At some point, that attitude shifted. People started crowdfunding their costs. Some offered a product or a service, but some didn't offer anything. Funding a lifestyle, it was referred to. Nowadays, I see some call it virtual panhandling.
Yeah, it sucks when creators who are already successful kind of try to squeeze even more money out of their audience without offering anything in return. That's terrible, and we should call out the people who do that. On the other end, though, if a small fry who isn't as successful starts up a Ko-Fi page as a tip jar with no expectation that anyone pay into it, Is that the same thing? Or has society decayed to the point where gratuities are always expected even on YouTube? I also do want to stress that if you are providing additional content with it, I think it's totally fine to have a Patreon or similar thing that can help you fund your content creation. Just seems like a normal revenue stream to me.
And sponsors caught on that some content creators were more than willing to play the sympathy card, and that some people are parasocial enough to choke down ads if it comes from someone they like. I remember around 2019, sponsors wouldn't answer any questions I had for their products. They would just try to coach me on manipulating the audience. Tell them it supports you. It keeps the content flowing. You get in the bag. And it kind of worked for some because it was seen as rebellious. But corporate-sponsored dissidents ain't rebellion. It's still just an ad.
Yeah, I hate those kinds of jaded, yeah, guess I'm a sellout, but your boy's gotta get that bag. I hate those ad reads too. Terrible sales pitch for usually terrible products. Now, I haven't had the luxury of speaking directly to any sponsors yet, so I can't really comment, but I can only hope against hope that things are at least slightly different now, and that creators can leverage their power in the space to demand a little more accountability from these sponsors.
And this evolved into something else we don't have a name for. I constantly see creators get stuck in a feedback loop of spending more than they can make. They hire an editor and hope that the production value or a faster upload schedule will let them make more money. But they don't, so they make more videos with less quality, and more reminders to sub to the Patreon or sponsors or whatever. Now the editor's overworked, so they need to hire another editor, so they make more videos to make up for it and more funneling towards the Patreon and sponsors. We shame people for trying to chase infinite growth, but we don't shame people who try to outrun their own infinite costs. When a corporation does it, it's an affront to God, but when we do it, it's just human nature.
Okay, hold on. There's a lot to unpack from this. So, to begin, I don't think it's shameful to try to invest in your content creation business any more than any other business investing in themselves. Hiring an editor at a fair wage, even if you're taking out a loan to cover the first couple of months for the sake of delivering a better quality product for your audience, that seems like a normal and reasonable business decision in my opinion. Yeah, it implies the creator needs to ramp up video creation to cover those costs, but if the bottleneck in video creation was the editing process anyway, like it is for me, it seems like you're just killing two birds with one stone. No foul play involved. Chasing infinite growth is impossible, yes, and the corporations who try to do it are dumb. But it's not the reckless spending that makes us hate corporations. It's that they're spending that money being evil. If a bakery goes into debt to buy a delivery van, or even if a bakery conglomerate goes into debt to buy a fleet of delivery vans, that's not evil. It's just a business taking a risk on an investment. But if a bakery conglomerate goes into debt, massively lowering their prices to undercut all the other bakeries, waiting for those bakeries to get run out of business, and then jacking the prices back up now that there's no competition, that's evil. And likewise, if a content creator is cashing six-figure paychecks from Stake, please gamble responsibly, and then underpays their editors as much as possible to maximize their own profits, yeah, that's evil. It's not necessarily the desire to grow that's evil, it's the things that you're willing to do to get there.
And that's the exact process that already infested and laid waste to the game journalism industry.
Now, I can't speak to the game journalism industry as I've never been a part of it, so I'll take your word for it there. I do think the never-ending cycle of spend money to hire people just to fire them right after, I think that's pretty terrible, and I think that's a key example of corporate spending veering into the evil territory. And I think it's bad when game publishers like Activision Blizzard or content creators like Rooster Teeth do it too. Or, I guess did in Rooster Teeth's case. Employees should be a long-term investment, and teams should have the opportunity to grow. If you're only hiring people for a brief boost in productivity and then you lay them off again right after, what's even the point?
And it's only going to get worse among content creators because, one, it works better when it's done by a person that people are emotionally attached to. Think of their livelihoods. We have people to pay. They have mouths to feed. Creators are metaphorically tying themselves to train tracks and giving you two options, content with ads or no content at all. You are the hero or the villain.
Whoa, hold your horses there, cowboy! I think it's a little unreasonable to describe running a business with employees as tying themselves to train tracks. They do have people to pay. They do have mouths to feed. That doesn't magically change just because you're making videos for the internet instead of running a real business. To be more specific in my critique, though, it's not the audience being given two options, it's the creator being given a spectrum of options. On one end, giving up full-time content creation entirely and sacking all your employees in doing so, and on the other end, selling your soul to Stake, please gamble responsibly in the pursuit of infinite wealth. Both of these options, in my opinion, are bad. But there's a whole host of other options, such as seeking reasonable sponsorships for products you can, in good faith, endorse. You could start a Patreon or a Ko-Fi or whatever crowdsourcing platform of choice to crowdfund your content, providing extra content made for those crowdfunders to justify their purchase, the way that HBomb or Nerdcube do. Most critically, though, you can disperse your income among multiple avenues so that you can be a little more resilient to shocks against one revenue stream. And I'll provide an example of that in a little bit. There are so many more options than just content with exploitative ads or no content at all. And I hope all creators know this. And to finish off that metaphor, there are no true heroes or villains in real life, no matter how hard some people try to be either. We're all just people, responsible for our own choices, whether that be the sponsors choosing who to sponsor, the creators choosing what to advertise, or the audience choosing who to support.
And secondly, ads will only continue to get worse as sponsorships are being devalued. 10 years ago, content creator sponsorships were an experiment. Now we have more data, and many ad agencies are not happy with the information. They're pulling out, or they're renegotiating for a lower cost. Most of the sponsors that are left are either premium products or bottom-of-the-barrel scams like honey.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I definitely don't hear many ads for regular old products like Audible these days, but maybe I'm just hanging with the wrong crowd. I guess I would call HelloFresh, the one sponsor I genuinely use, a premium product, but surely there's a middle class of sponsors around somewhere, right? That offer less money but for a more reasonably priced product, right?
And going back to that initial tweet, if you don't like the ad, just skip it, is a strange thing to say out loud. Because here's what happens if you skip sponsored segments. You just get more sponsored segments in worse places. There used to be a time when sponsors would pay for entire videos dedicated solely to their product. But people skipped those, so sponsors then wanted the ads inside of other videos instead. Say first a sponsor pays for an ad, and it would get put at the end of the video. Then people start skipping the ends of the videos. Well, now a sponsor isn't going to pay the creator anymore unless they offer a deep discount or put the ads somewhere else, maybe at the start of the video. So now it's at the start of the video. People start skipping this part as well. Well, now the beginning and end of the video is devalued and the middle becomes prime real estate. People catch on to this as well, and now you get emails where sponsors tell you to put the ad somewhere after 2 minutes but before 7 minutes, or somewhere 10 minutes before the end. That's what skipping sponsors gets you. Watching more ads in worse places, and the creator doesn't even get more money for it because they devalued their video and took on more costs.
Alright, I played out that whole segment because, again, it is a lot. But I also have to wonder how much of this is a false dichotomy. As I mentioned before, I'm going to point to another creator called TLDR News, a YouTube channel that covers current events in the UK, in Europe, and across the globe. They have a video each year where they break down their revenue and their costs, including their policy with sponsors. Here's how their system goes. The sponsors are paying a fee to have their sponsored segments on however many videos there are across all the TLDR channels in a given week. These segments may have a small mention towards the start of the video, but the meat of their ads are guaranteed to be at the end of the video. They only take sponsorships from products they approve of and use, such as Ground News, and the sponsors have absolutely no say in the content of the videos they sponsor. They won't even know what videos they're sponsoring ahead of time, which makes sense because the channel covers current events. Even with the presumably steep discounts the sponsors force upon them, TLDR News is capable of sustaining a roster of about a dozen employees from the sponsors, normal ad revenue, their partnership with creator-owned platform Nebula, their Patreon, their own magazine, and their merch sales. It's a multi-pronged approach to sustaining their business, and I think it's a model that many YouTubers could look to for inspiration.
What is this trade deal? I make bad business decisions, you get a worse consumer experience.
I mean, it's hard to argue with that. Creators that take exploitative sponsorships really are just dragging the lifeboat down with all of us, so completely agree here.
And don't get it twisted, I'm not against the idea of sponsored segments. I just don't like the attitude and framing of needing to take sponsors. Say you want to take sponsors.
And I think that's the main point where we just have to disagree. If you're doing this full time, and especially if you have employees that you're responsible for, I think it's entirely reasonable to say that you might need a sponsorship to keep the lights on. And I don't think that's inherently bad. What matters is how you approach sponsors and making sure that you're handling sponsored segments ethically.
Only sponsor I took on my content was a stream for Raid Shadow Legends a long time ago because I had a smaller community who thought it'd be funny as an April Fool's gag. And I definitely want to take on sponsors now so I can fund more indie game development. But there's not that many things worth shilling. I don't think it's ethical for me personally to take video game sponsors, and I don't take sponsors for things I don't use.
I think that's all reasonable, especially since you don't see this as your job. And I do think as a game journalist, you have the responsibility to approach games with impartiality and to not take sponsorships for games in exchange for a fair review. And I'm glad you agree with me.
Other creators have told me that's absurd. It's absurd to ask that creators vet products and services they're being paid to advertise.
I have no idea who told you that. Maybe it was a certain former employer, but they're wrong. They are wrong, 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 wrong. If you as a creator aren't taking the time to at least vet your sponsors, you are doing something wrong.
No, I'll tell you what's absurd. This here is a demo version of an upcoming card game called The Restless sent to me by a Winslow Domain. He said, let me send it to you, no strings attached. I think you'd like it. I think your audience would like it. And if you do, feel free to say whatever you want about it on your channel during the Kickstarter campaign. Don't hold back. That's called having brass. That shows confidence in a product. That shows he did his research on me and my audience. And if one indie developer can do that, then bigger companies have no excuse.
I'm so happy you told this story, because actually I have a similar story to tell that just happened to me a couple days ago. Now, over the past year or so, I've actually gotten a ton of borderline spam emails from small publishers of tiny indie games that don't really get what my channel is about. Like, they talk about sponsoring ad videos for co-op restaurant simulators and the like, which just aren't the kind of games I cover on my channel. No shade to the developers, of course, but these emails are clearly just cookie-cutter marketing emails from an ad company that has my business email in a list somewhere. But a couple of days ago, I got an email from a solo indie developer named Van about an early demo for his game, Frontline Logistics Isarian Warfare. It's a military logistics simulator that is exactly the kind of game that I want to play. There was no sponsorship, no money involved, just, hey, I know you play military strategy games on your channel. The demo of my game is up on Steam for free, and I think you would like it. And he was right. Now, to be clear, the demo is a very early alpha, and it's still pretty rough around the edges, but this demo perfectly tickles my autism brain in a way that few other games have. I like it so much, in fact, that I'm going to make a full Let's Play video for it, and I'm leaving a link to the Steam page for the demo in the description, fully free to play. No sponsorship here, I didn't make any money off of that, I'm just promoting a game that I think is really cool and that people should try out. And I can't lie, getting that email might just be the first time I felt like an actual professional YouTuber. Anyway, I think your story is incredible, and I'm very happy that the creator got something good out of that, and I'm especially glad that his Kickstarter raised so much money for his game. I love seeing indie developers succeed. But, and I hate being a party pooper on this, I also worry that that kind of advertising isn't going to scale. If you don't mind me asking, how many creators have been sending you emails offering Steam keys or offering to mail you games since that video came out? Like, if a developer has that kind of confidence in their product, that's amazing. But if I'm getting these kinds of emails, I know your inbox must be overflowing with Steam keys for games that you would never actually play.
At least get my name right in the emails. The quality has dropped. The responsibility has shifted from the sponsors, and instead of asking better of them or of themselves, content creators are shifting the weight to their audience's wallet. This isn't personal because it happens too many times. I think it's systemic. I don't know if someone's being greedy and dishonest or simply compliant and gotten themselves into a rough spot financially. But none of that is the audience's problem, and blaming them shouldn't be normalized.
Again, no arguments here that the audience is not to blame. I think the responsibility for these kinds of exploitative sponsorships falls on the shoulders of the sponsors themselves and the creators who take them. I think that anyone running a YouTube business is responsible for their own decisions, and pinning the blame for any of it on the audience is terrible.
I will say, though, Tirzu threw me for a loop when he jumped in to say in a now-deleted tweet, people don't realize how much cooler the internet would be, the amount of product services that would be commercially viable if AdBlocker didn't exist. I understand ads are annoying, but people literally do not know what they gave up. No, I think people do know what they gave up. The ads.
I gotta be honest, if it weren't for your screenshot there, I wouldn't have believed anyone would say that. Ads almost universally suck. And that's been the case for as long as ads have existed. I remember being a little kid on the early days of Web 2.0 and seeing seizure-inducing flashing bar ads that simply said, "You are a winner, click here to receive your prize." And I wondered, even as a little kid, who on earth would be dumb enough to fall for that? Well, it turns out a lot of people were. And that's why Google AdSense, a not perfect but much more structured and vetted ad supplier, took over the advertising space on basically every website still around these days. If you're on a website deemed too risque for AdSense, you're probably getting served these kinds of scam and spam ads all over again. It's no wonder that people just say screw it and block them all, even if it hurts the websites that rely on ads. Because to many people, no amount of good those websites do is worth seeing another stupid ad about boner pills.
I didn't know people existed with this cheery optimism that if AdBlocker didn't exist, the world would be a better place, especially not when only about 30% of internet users have an AdBlocker.
I actually didn't know it was that low. I would have assumed it would have been a lot higher, like 50 or 60%. But then again, maybe if it was that high, the internet would just collapse because no website could pay for itself anymore.
I'll engage in this hypothetical though. A world without ad blockers would bring about the invention of AdBlocker, as it already did.
100% agreed.
On one end, why wouldn't it turn into an arms race to create the most obtrusive ads possible, each one louder than the last to try and compete in a flooded market? On the other end, some of the most effective ads are the ones that don't feel like ads at all, so why wouldn't advertising become more subtle, under the table, undisclosed, unethical? I just don't buy this cooler internet sponsored by Amazon.
Also agreed, but unfortunately for any place on the internet not owned by venture capital, when the ad blockers hit, it's got to be either sponsored by Amazon or directly funded by you. Okay, and that's the end of the video. I think if there's any big takeaways I want you to have, Frost, it's that I don't feel it's unreasonable for a content creator to want to do this full time, and I don't feel it's unreasonable that a creator might genuinely need a sponsor or two to keep the lights on and keep their career going. I totally agree with you that some sponsors can absolutely be terrible for the creator as well as the audience, but as long as creators can stay vigilant and vet their sponsors, I see them as just another part of the revenue stream. Now, a question I purposefully left unanswered is this. Is it bad for content creation to become a business? And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I suppose it can be, and we have 2 decades of examples to pull from in either direction just from YouTube alone. But on the whole, I believe that it's okay for creators to aspire for this to be something more than just a hobby or a side hustle. And if sponsors can help fill that gap ethically and responsibly, I think it's okay to take them. Anyway, I hope I've presented both sides of our discussion fairly, and I hope you can appreciate my perspective. Much love, Jim.